So welcome everyone to the session which is titled When Pairing Goes Pear-shaped. It's essentially a session about pairing anti-practices that we have noticed. So we should introduce ourselves.
Yeah.
My name is Jamie.
I'm Scott.
Yeah, as you just heard, by the way, from the mic testing. But yeah, so essentially we're going to talk about a few anti-patterns that we've noticed when we've been pairing over the ages.
Ages.
Yeah, exactly. So this is not going to be your typical session where we're just going to keep talking. We have planned it a little bit differently. We're going to do a short skit or an ad-lib at the start of each scenario. And we'd encourage you at the end to guess what was wrong with the scenario, and kind of we'll give you our views on what you could have done differently, and we'd encourage your inputs as well. Sound okay? So the way the session is going to run is there's going to be two characters. Clearly, I'm the one with the big muscles and the beard and stuff like that because that person just matches me. For folks who don't know, this is Street Fighter characters. That's Zangief and that's Guile.
Yeah.
So Zangief is generally a bad character, like he's the villain. So that's what I'll be representing for most of these scenarios. I'm going to be the villain. Totally suits my look, right?
And the tattoo will be different. It'll be a Canadian flag.
Oh. So my wife actually spotted that and she was like, Scott's not going to like it. I'm like, he's not going to notice it.
It's all right. It's fine. Whatever.
So yeah, that's how it's going to be. Just to make it easier, I'll be consistently the villain, as in real life. All right, so let's start with scenario 1.
Cool. All right.
Ready?
So Jamie, we're going to be doing a BOSH deployment because our story says that we need to update our production system. So first step is that we need to edit our manifest. And so the BOSH release that we're doing is, okay, it's this version, so I'm going to edit that property. All right, cool. We're going to bump the instance count to 5. All right, cool. I'm going to save that. Okay, BOSH deploy. All right, cool. This is probably going to take about half an hour or so. So should we do a little ping pong?
Sounds perfect.
All right, cool. All right. Okay, you win again. All right. Okay, we're back. Okay. Okay, cool, it deployed. All right, so one thing I want to check is the log. So I'm going to just do a BOSH SSH onto the first job, and let's take a look at var vcap sys log.
Okay. Can I ask a question?
Yeah?
What is BOSH?
Say what? What?
All right, that's the scenario. What do you think I did wrong?
You didn't speak up.
You didn't really follow much because you didn't understand what's happening.
Yeah,
Assumption.
you guys have nailed it. Yeah, so that's essentially what this is. Like, this is the passive pair, right? So essentially, all I did was just listening and trying to follow along, and I was just asking questions towards the end. So I was trying to catch up with what Scott was doing, and that's not what ideal pairing is, right? Pairing is not about one person driving and the second person just asking, okay, what is this? Trying to learn and like passively learning. Pairing in the ideal scenario, in this scenario, I should have asked Scott, what are you trying to achieve? What are the tools we're using and how we're going to go about doing that? And we should both agree beforehand, this is how we're going to approach the problem and these are the steps I'm going to take so that I'm contributing fully as a pair. It doesn't matter that I don't know, but I still need to understand before we start the task what we're going to be doing.
Yeah.
Right? Anything to add?
No, you got it.
Anybody faced this before or have gone through these experiences?
Which of the pairs could have called that out or should have called that out?
It's a good question. Now this,
Yeah, I wasn't that good either because I was just letting it go and then doing stuff and assuming that my pair knew what was going on. But it's also, that's usually the default. It's easy to do that, so it's always good to be the squeaky wheel and ask for help or to say stop. It's that it was too late when he asked, what is BOSH? Because we've already done a bunch of work and we played a game of ping pong and then we got back to that. Whereas the context would have been very clear, as in like, it could have been like, hey, what's this manifest? What is that? And then we can start the conversation a little bit earlier on before we get too deep and technical.
So from the perspective of yourself, the driver, like, how would you encourage Jeremy to ask so he just does it naturally?
Yeah, that's, one thing that we've been doing on Rabbit Team is doing Pomodoro pairing, is to get another person to drive, to switch, so that if you don't know the commands, you're not going to be able to type them. And so it encourages, it almost forces the questions to be asked.
So you're working on like a regime that basically, I don't know, every 15 minutes something you swap? Or is this common sense just as?
Around 25 minutes, yeah. But yeah, it's up to you. As a pair, you figure it out what works best.
Yeah. So when you're doing TDD, it's easy because you have the ping pong approach, right? I mean, you write, like one person writes the test, the second person writes the code, then they write the text, moves on to the code. So that's easy when you're doing TDD. When you're doing operations kind of work where there's long feedback cycles and there's not really tests that give you that feedback, you have to do a deploy and then come back to it. Or you might have to do a lot of investigations. The Pomodoro technique is really cool because then you have a fixed time box where somebody's driving. But that's good ways to change control. But in an ideal world, even if I'm driving, I still want to make sure my pair understands what I'm about to try, discuss it with my pair, and then proceed. Right? So I think both parties really have to call it out.
Yeah. So it says here that we need to do some cleanup. So you said that we're going to write a script for this?
Let's do a very simple script for this. Let's do a bash script because that's what I'm really good at.
Okay. All right. Can I give it a whirl then?
Sure.
So, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Let's do that. Okay.
All right. So okay.
So when you start, you first have to do the hash bang symbol thing at the top.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And then
you want to enable -e as well.
Okay. Yeah. I know.
Okay.
Okay. Cool. Okay. So I guess we're gonna have our first variable.
Yeah. So that's $1. You want to type.
Yeah.
No,
okay.
$1.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So we're gonna check that, and then we're gonna do this. We're gonna clean up. So we're gonna do this in a loop, right? So all right. Cool.
Let's use a simple for loop. So type for. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Thanks.
Yeah.
All right.
You missed the semicolon. Don't miss the semicolon.
Okay. I was gonna get to that. Just let me finish this. Okay. All right. Cool. All right. Is this good?
Seems okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
All right.
So what went wrong there?
Jamie was hectoring you there to not be too micromanagement of what you're doing.
Yeah, like almost to the keystroke, essentially. Like I was not just, the backseat driver. So not only was he, he was propelling me forward, but like he didn't even ask if I knew some of the things, if I knew what I was doing a little bit. We could have spoken at a higher level language, saying, okay, let's parse the first positional variable. Okay, let's do a loop and go through all the environments that we want to clean up. We could have just spoken like that, but no, he was like, just assuming that I've never touched a keyboard before.
Yeah, I think the temptation when this happens a lot when one pair knows a lot more than the other. So it's easy to fall into the temptation that, okay, I'm just going to tell you how it's done and this is what we should do. But you really don't want to do that. You want to let the other person kind of learn on, like when they try, right? Because that's the best, tool for learning. You want to actually try it. So even though you might know everything, you want to balance it out with like letting the person fail versus giving them the information beforehand. Like even before he typed the semicolon, for example, I was like, no, type the semicolon. So yeah, you want to be careful and like take your pair along. So as Scott said, right, at the start, give them a high level and then see how it goes.
I have an observation. So this was pretty clear, like how Jamie was kind of interrupting. But I was watching myself in your position, and I noticed that, for example, you said something what I did say. It was like, oh, I know. Okay, that's fine. And speaking with my colleagues, I kind of figured like why I did feel uncomfortable saying just, I know, never mind, I know, I'm doing this, right? It a lot depends on the form, how you do this. And it may become very much like kind of discouraging for the other part and just break the flow completely.
Yeah. So
this is something what the Scott's pile is taking into account as well, I suppose.
So I think the question is just sort of recognizing like my reaction to this was to almost be a little bit impatient, I guess, around it, and Jamie not picking up on my impatience, and then me sort of also just resigning to the fact that it's like, okay, he's just going to tell me what to do and I'm just going to do it. And I think that's a very human reaction, right? Is that we don't like being told what to do. Think about your childhood and your parents are telling you to clean up your room. You're like, no, and it's like, it's the same thing sometimes when you're programming, that we have mutual respect for each other of our capabilities and abilities, and we want to take that into account when we're pairing.
In fairness, there was you got more and more impatient, and then you just resigned.
Yeah, yeah. And so, the comment was around sort of an escalating impatientness on my part, and then I was just like, forget about it.
Yeah, so just quickly mentioning another manifestation of a backseat driver is when you pass the keyboard to your pair and they start typing, there's tendency to just take it back and start typing the command again, which is equal to backseat driving, right? I mean, if they don't know the syntax, just explain to them how they can find the information, give them the information, and let them drive, because you want them to get the muscle memory as well, right? So it's another thing to keep in mind. Cool, let's move on.
Okay, so, it looks like our story, we need to use the Ops Manager API to upload a product. And so, okay, this linked to the API doc, so this looks really interesting. So you can see how we just, this get thing, and then we just,
this reminds me of the good old days when I used to write APIs and we used REST. Have you heard of REST, by the way? Have you read Roy Fielding's paper on REST?
I like sleeping.
Yeah?
I've heard it's healthy.
Sure, but REST is a really awesome protocol because really what it does is makes super good advantage of HTTP. And HTTP is a brilliant protocol, by the way. Have you read all the different verbs that's there in HTTP and how they're used?
I heard there's a teapot.
And did you know that HTTP actually is one layer of the application OSI stack?
What?
Like, do you know about the OSI stack? Can I explain to you the OSI stack?
Is that what this doc is about? Like, I don't get it. Yeah.
All right, you can get the idea, right? Like,
all right. So yeah, what went wrong there? what went pear-shaped there?
You went off on a tangent, way too much details.
Yeah.
so not just sorry.
No, yeah.
Okay, so it's not just about the details; it's about the Geeksplainer thing, right?
Yeah.
I implicitly assumed that Scott doesn't know what REST is, that he doesn't know what the OSI stack is, what HTTP is, and I was over and eagerly explaining to him concepts that I knew without even assuming that he knows, right? Sure, this is a very over-exaggerated example, but it's but that tends to happen sometimes when you know a lot and you think you're pairing with somebody who has lesser knowledge. It's easy to assume that since they're junior, they probably don't know this, so let me explain all of this to them. That is not ideal, right? In an ideal world, you ask them, okay, do you know this already? If they do, then move on, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the times people justify the Geeksplainer phenomena by saying that if they knew it, they would have made better suggestions, or I didn't have confidence that they knew it. One technique which I use is, if you're going to be solving a problem, ask them what do they understand of this concept, and ask them for a solution, right? So make them drive more essentially, if you don't have confidence that they don't know this already, right? So essentially all I'm saying is solve it by conversation, right? Just talk more, ask your pair more what they know, and then keep building up on that. Don't just assume that they don't know something before giving them a whole explanation.
Yeah,
right?
Got nothing to add. Any questions about that one? So I think one strategy is to, stories are awesome, and I think we all love telling them and hearing them, but there's a time and a place for it, and sometimes like tech talks, like that's why we have our tech talks. It's almost like an outlet for our, our want and need to be able to talk about this really cool, arbitrary little tiny thing in some weird awkward domain that no one knows about, and then we can talk about it in a forum that you can talk to more people about it and doesn't interrupt your pairing session. All right.
Cool.
Next. All right. So, oh yeah, okay. I saw this story in the backlog. I was really looking forward to doing it. So, we need to like kill this process, and so I know that our stem cells don't include pkill, but I believe that's the tool that we should use. But in order to use it, yeah, we need to build a new stem cell. And so I looked at the docs on how to do that, and I was like, okay, cool, we can just run the build for that. But apparently, we need to have a new compiler because like the pkill doesn't work with the old compiler. So let's get that set up, and then.
I know how to do that, by the way. You can just run this command, and we can actually compile it. Yeah?
Perfect. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, now we got that installed, and then oh, we're on like a super old kernel. Maybe we should probably add the new kernel as well, and then now we have the perfect system for killing the process.
Yeah,
all
that
right.
Makes sense. Let's do it.
Awesome. Cool.
All right. What's wrong with that?
You let him go way out there.
What?
Right?
Yeah.
Your turn, right?
No, this one's your
Oh, it's
turn.
my turn. Okay. So yeah, the Shoegazing Navigator, right? So essentially, one of the
No,
jobs.
sorry, it is my turn. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But go ahead. You already started. Bad pair.
So one of the jobs of the pair is essentially navigating, right? So when I'm not driving, it's my responsibility to step back, think about what the scope of the story is, think about where we're going, what we're doing right now, how does that fit back into the story, what we're achieving right now, does that fit with other patterns that the team have done? So basically taking that step back and reviewing what we're doing and making sure that we're taking a step in the right direction. I mean, not like bike shedding or doing stuff that's outside the scope of the story. It's okay to do those, but you need to have conversations for those first, right? So it's my job to make sure that we're on path, essentially.
Yeah. Like in that example, a more attentive pair may have said, why do we need p-kill? Why don't we just use kill? And I was like, oh yeah, but then we don't get to compile new kernel and do all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
So it's easy to get dragged into the fun games and tricks and puzzles that we do in software development.
Yep.
All right, questions? Nope, all right, let's move on. Okay, yeah. All right, so, okay, let me launch Vim. Okay, so one of the issues that we had in this script is that we need to change the quotes from single quotes to double quotes.
Okay.
I know there's we have this Vim surround plugin.
Okay.
I always forget the shortcut, but it's just the one line, so I'm just gonna change it there,
Okay.
and change it there.
Okay.
Okay, cool. I'm going to go on, and then we need to change that value. That should properly interpolate the variable now that we're using
It's colon WQ, by the way.
What?
You can use colon WQ to
colon WQ?
Yeah,
okay.
to do the whole surround bit.
Colon WQ. What? I'm back in the terminal. Dude. All right, we can switch it up. So what went wrong there, besides my poor Vim skills?
And my horrible WQ for surround, but yeah.
Feels like if you joined forces, yeah, you might have gotten somewhere.
So can you repeat that?
If you joined forces,
If we joined forces,
you would have gotten
can you elaborate on that? What do you mean by that?
As in, you were doing your thing, and
Yeah.
Jamie thought he was trying to help you, but not really.
Yeah.
And yeah, the ultimate result was something
Yeah.
unexpected.
So the comment is that Jamie sort of went out on his own to do it, whereas we could have worked collaboratively to figure out what that shortcut was. So yeah, the Googler. So this is sort of the person that is, while you're busy trying to get stuff done, they're off going I don't really get it, so I'm going to look it up on my own. But really, as a pair, you're working together, and that you want to do that together so that you can actually feed off of each other. As you might know, you don't need to Google it. You're like, oh yeah, we can find that shortcut somewhere else. Or here's a way to get help within Vim in order to figure it out. But I just kept on going, and Jamie sort of abandoned me for a small period.
Yeah. So I think if you want to Google and you need more information, it always makes sense to Google it together as a pair. However, there are exceptions to the advice, right? I mean, what if both of you don't know something about, let's say for example, Bosch, right? And you need to read the documentation. Now, different people have different reading speeds, so you don't necessarily want to read the whole thing together. So that's completely okay to say, okay, as a pair, let's split for 30 minutes or 45 minutes, a predetermined time essentially, right? And say, let's both read the documentation and then come back. That's pretty okay, because then you have a predetermined contract that, okay, let's go ahead and read both these things together and come back and then start deciding together, so that you both have the same information. In this case, the problem was my pair went ahead without me actually contributing, and then I had more information to the problem which he didn't have context on, and he'd have to catch up anyway.
Yeah.
And he probably might have done some other decisions while I was actually Googling something. So.
And it's, when you're pairing beside each other, it's sort of rude too for someone to sort of disassociate from the pairing session and do this. And what's even more difficult is when you're in a remote pairing session. So we do a lot of remote pairing, and it's very easy to have, especially if you have two monitors, you have one monitor on Google or Chrome or whatever, and you got your email and all this stuff. Then your other window or your other monitor is your actual pairing session. And one of the struggles that we have as a remote team is to not constantly be a Googler and looking things on the side, because you're not really being a very attentive pair at that point. Cool. Any questions about this one? All right. Okay.
Okay.
Oh yeah, so yeah, they were telling me about that. You got this really awesome like workstation automation. So I can see here that like you just launched this shell script and it's gonna like homebrew, install a bunch of stuff, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
I like it. Yeah.
It's a nice script, but I don't think it's the most object-oriented. I think we can refactor this, and I think there's a better way to model this in object-oriented. Let me show you what I mean.
What?
So here, let's refactor the script. We need inheritance for this. Here, let me show you what it is. Let's do this. But I think for this part, let's do composition. So let's do all of this. And then for this, yeah, let's just change this into a separate class. This does not belong here. And there you go. What do you think of this design?
You just created 15 more files.
But you like the design, right?
I don't know. I sort of like the nice simple script. What's the deal?
All right. What's wrong with the scenario? No.
Like over engineering is very cool and like you like it, right? And you can get lost very easily.
Sure. So you're right in a way, but we were going for more the exhibitionist style. So essentially, I had an idea which I wanted to convey to Scott, but rather than stepping back and like either showing it to him at a whiteboard or trying to explain it to him with words, I was like, let me demonstrate what I mean and just write the code. There's multiple drawbacks of that, right? One is you're trying to implement something without your pair really knowing what's going on. So all he's doing or he or she is doing is just catching up on what's going on. And second is once you've written something or like written code, it's very easy to say, yeah, that works, and hence let's just go with that solution rather than both of you talking about a solution and coming up with a solution together. That's why, personally at least, we think that this is a bad idea. Whenever you want to talk about a solution, talk about it in the abstract, right? Go to a whiteboard, grab a pen and paper, just talk about it, talk about the solution at a high level, and then go ahead and try to do some implementation. But don't implement and then demonstrate, right?
Yeah, there's not one chance for me to provide any feedback of what you were talking about there. You just sort of went on, and I was just along for the ride.
I also noticed at the end of that session, you two were so primed for getting at loggerheads.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, do you have any advice on, because there's going to be situations where person A thinks it should be one way and person B thinks it should be the other way, and you just
We are going to cover that in a
Yeah,
conversation. Yes.
Yeah.
So one technique which I like in that case is to have pseudocode written in the code base there itself so that the person understands the bigger picture, you're reading the pseudocode versus actually implementing it.
Yeah, so the comment was just sort of, pseudocoding an idea because that constrains the actual time that's spent, and you can get that feedback a lot faster, and I would not be as frustrated. Cool. What's the next one? Okay.
Wait. All right.
Cool. All right. So it looks like the build failed last night. So all right. Well, might as well start looking at some of the logs. All right. So okay. So it looks like was GitHub down? I don't know. Okay. Well, let's look at the previous jobs. All right. Oh, I see. Okay, yeah, that's just a missing semicolon there. Okay, I'm just gonna make a commit, and that should make the green build green again. Cool. All right. Cool. It was just a typo. Nice.
All right. What was wrong with that?
I can only wonder how you call it on the next slide. You are very involved, Jamie.
Yeah.
Oh.
Super involved, right?
What, wasn't he attentive? I missed that. Oh.
Yeah, your turn.
Oh yeah. So the Daydreamer is the person who's not really paying attention, and it could be for many reasons. They're either bored, maybe haven't had a break in a while, you need some coffee. There's a lot of stuff going on Twitter. But it's, to some extent, it was also my responsibility there to also to reel him in. I didn't even notice that he was daydreaming like that. And sometimes when you're doing grunt work, like trying to figure out what broke the build or troubleshooting an environment, it can be a long slog and sometimes boring. And that's actually when you want your pair to be attentive and helping you out. And so, yeah, when you have the Daydreamer, I'm just going solo and he doesn't get to pick up the context. So when someone says, oh, why did the build break? You'd be like, I don't know, ask Scott, he figured it out. It doesn't really help.
And it happens a lot more when you, like, there's one person with a lot of context and you're trying to investigate what's going on. It's very easy to race ahead and say, okay, I think I know why that's happening, and then jump between hypotheses. And if I'm the pair who does not have the context, it's really hard to keep up, right? So the same thing goes for, like, with TDD, you want to just be continuously engaged, right? So let the other person drive and figure out what's going on and kind of force them to say, okay, why don't you take a look what's going on? Or let's talk about what are the possible problems that could happen, right? So just keep making conversations happen and then keep investigating.
Yeah, and sometimes it just requires a break or stepping away from the problem periodically. The technique that I like to use to keep people engaged is, Carlo knows this very well, is I always ask people to bet on things. It's like asking to bet, like if you're to put like, €1 on it, shows how confident you are about of your reasoning around what the problem is. And it usually keeps the brain a little bit occupied because then you're going, it's like, oh yeah, if I was to bet, what's the probability of this being correct or not? I don't know, but that gets your mind engaged a little bit more. Cool. All right, any questions on that one?
How do you bring it up that, how do you solve this problem? You just tell the person to...
For me personally, I tried to be proactive about it. You can't blame people for being bored when problems are boring. And it's sort of why I try to make it entertaining, try to make it more interesting so that they can be involved. And then it also comes down to like Pomodoro as well. So just saying like, I'm not touching the keyboard, you're gonna drive for a little bit. I don't think it's as important this is where fast feedback is required and not necessarily like late feedback where it says, hey, we just paired all day and you seemed in La La Land. That's sort of almost too late because it begs you to say like, well, where were you while I was in La La Land? How come you didn't reel me in? But yeah. All right, next one. All right, okay, cool. So I'm really excited to join this team. I've heard like so many great things about this project.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
And it's like, it's like Rails. I don't know too much, but whatever, I'm eager to learn. So I think it looks like we're updating some gem.
So essentially the story is about auth, and we need to start integrating with this authentication server. There's already a gem for that. It's called device. So let's just add it to our gem file and do a bundle install.
Bundle? What's bundle?
You don't know what bundle is? How long have you been a developer?
I don't know, a few years.
It installs gems. There we go. So let's continue.
Okay,
so that succeeded. All right. So now all we need to do is make this API call and get this federated authentication with SAML going.
Oh, what?
It should be pretty straightforward.
Wait a second, huh?
What, you don't know what that is?
I have no idea what you just said there.
Who hired you?
Can you say that again? Sorry, I was getting frustrated. I had to fight back.
All right, what was wrong with that scenario?
I think I know. You should be taking notes.
Not quite.
So this is interesting because in all scenarios both are wrong, but yeah, this is one special scenario of like the Scaredy Cat. So you'll end up coming across pairing with people who intimidate you, right? It could not necessarily, like this was an exaggeration of course of somebody being mean, but it could be because of the amount of knowledge they have, it could be because of their demeanor, it could be because of multiple things, right? It could be just because you have a big beard and bald like me, so I just look scary, right? So yeah, essentially, we encourage people to keep asking questions, right? And just, be really good pairs. You want to be mindful of people who are a bit more quiet with you, and you want to encourage them to kind of converse. I'm talking about the person who's probably most scary looking. And for the other person as well, you want to encourage them to not really be scared, right? You have to have conversations. Pairing is all about two people going at a problem together. It's not one person like having their opinion and then the second person just agreeing or catching up or catching on and then getting to a solution. It's both people collaborating together, the start of the problem, figuring out a solution together, and then implementing it together, right? So in an ideal world, I should have stopped and taken the time to explain what's going on here, why this is a good solution, and taken his opinion on how we could have gone
or
forward,
even
right?
gotten my background.
Sure, yes, yes.
It's like you could have said, instead of like, you don't know bundler, it's like, what do you know about package management?
Yep.
Or something like that, or dependency management, or, and this is definitely an issue in our industry, which is just around contempt culture in general, which is just dismissing things that you haven't even worked with, but you'll say, it's just terrible. Why? Because famous people on Twitter rant about it. And then you're like, have you used it? Like, no, but that important person supposedly says it's terrible. And you can hear this around, like it's not just in your pairing session, it's in the office. You'll hear people dismiss things, or they'll say like, they'll be having like a phone call with someone else, and it's like, and the person on the other end is like me, not knowing what OAuth is, and then at the end you're like, I had this call with this dev and they had no clue what they were talking about, and then you sort of feel like, well, what do people think about me when that kind of situation happens? And it just makes for a bad work environment where you're just itching to leave.
Yeah.
Any-
Questions, comments?
Cool. All right. Okay. All right.
Sorry,
Oh,
just to go back to the
okay,
last one.
cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
The person with the scaredy cat.
Yeah,
So there was the scaredy cat and there's the scary
Y-
cat.
Yeah.
So which one was the problem there? I would have
Yeah.
thought the scary
Yeah.
cat was more the problem.
So the question is like, who's the problem there? The scaredy cat, the person who's intimidated by the loud and knowledgeable know-it-all, or is the know-it-all the problem?
my opinion is both, right?
Yeah.
Like both of them are clearly wrong. The person, like Scott spoke about contempt culture, right? Like the scary cat should never have done that in the first place. But let's say you are in that situation, right? You want to give that person feedback, right? Have a conversation with that person and say, hey, your behavior, maybe you don't mean it, but your behavior intimidates me, or your behavior does not make me feel comfortable to ask you questions or contribute completely as a pair. Yeah, and that's solution one is what I would like suggest.
Yeah.
There are other options as well if that doesn't work, of course, but 99% of the times just having a conversation generally works because people don't know sometimes that they're intimidating, right? They do it out of habit. You want to give them the benefit of the doubt, right? So have a conversation with them, tell them this is how you feel, and generally people do change. They will correct themselves.
Yeah, and they'll know it themselves because they'll say like, oh yeah, people don't come to me for asking for help, and they go to this other person, and it's like, I got ideas, how come they're not asking me? And it's, well, sometimes you need to.
That's really key for me. We zoom out, our value is kindness, and one of the things we do to be kind to people is set them up to have a good future. And if you're the kind of person who people are too scared to talk to, you're not going to have a great future.
Yeah.
So on the other hand, the thing which worked for me is when I'm pairing with someone who knows much more and I'm scared of the person, I just stated that I don't know this, I might do this thing very bad, feel free to interrupt me and correct me on the way, but let me do it. Right?
Mhm.
That helps.
Being proactive is good.
Yeah.
The next one. All right, cool. So, it seems like we need to parse this web request. I'm thinking that we should probably start with a high-level test, so maybe an integration level thing. Yeah.
No, I think a unit test makes more sense over here, right?
I don't know. Like, let's just try the integration test first. I don't know, is it?
It's going to take so long to write the test. If you start with the unit test, we can get quick feedback, right?
But I don't know. Haven't you seen that meme, like passed unit test but failed integration test?
I mean, I'm not saying we're not going to do it. We'll do it eventually,
Yeah.
right? But let's just start with the unit test, right?
Let's just try it. Like, why not?
No, let's start with the unit. That will fail quicker, and then we can get to the
Okay, whatever.
integration.
Fine. We'll do it your way.
All right. What was wrong with that? Yeah.
More than just that, though, it's not just the disagreement, but there wasn't really a conversation.
Yes.
There was no bending, which is. So I would like to think that I was being more positive, saying that, hey, let's try, whereas Jamie was just not a chance, was not even giving me a chance to like make my case for why I'd like to do it in integration first. And so I think I was being perfectly flexible, whereas he wasn't. And so, and this sort of goes with a lot of the themes around this, which is having that dialogue to make sure that you want to feel like that your point is heard or your idea is understood by your pair, so that you are making consensus as a pair and choosing which way to go forward. In the end, I just surrendered. I said, okay, forget about it. I just don't want to have this. It takes too much of a toll to have this debate all the time.
Yeah, and it's important to be cognizant of the fact that we are having an impasse or whatever, right? You'll encounter pairs who you differ with significantly, right? There are some pairs who you will just connect with and you generally have the same approaches. There are going to be some pairs who you don't agree with necessarily. It's important to recognize that fact and sometimes call it out as well, right? So I've paired with a person in the past where whenever there was a problem, we always had two opposite solutions. We were always on opposite ends of it, but we had respect for each other and we knew that we are both, like it could go either way, right? So we would present our arguments to each other, and depending on who would feel more stronger about that, we would make it explicitly. We would call out explicitly that, okay, I prefer this, but I think you make more sense here, or you feel more stronger about this, so we'll go with this option, right? And I think it's very important to make sure you call that out, because otherwise what happens is you end up boiling inside, right? It reaches a point where you'll start avoiding that person and you don't want to pair with that person just because it's so hard to make decisions, and you don't want to ever reach that point, right? You want to make sure that you're always working together really well. Yeah. So it's all about communication, right? As Scott said, right? Just over communicate. If you know something's hard, call that out as well, right? Because if you feel it's hard, but maybe for example in this case, Scott was trying really hard, but I just didn't care. I was like, whatever, just move on, right? Let's just choose this. And I probably might have missed that Scott was like feeling frustrated that I didn't listen to a suggestion enough, right? So it's important to have that conversation and call out how you feel when you're pairing, right?
And a way to mitigate this partially is to sort of how much do you give a darn kind of quotient. Yeah. So like on a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you really care about it? Because sometimes we tend to sound like very opinionated on some things for everything. And some of them, they're actually quite loosely held opinions, and other of them are stronger. And it's good to have, that's a good way to initiate the conversation. It's like, if his was a 5 and I was a 2, I was just thinking of trying it out. And he was like, no, 5 because of this. I'm like, okay, cool. We've started the conversation.
Yep.
All right.
Questions, comments?
So if I understand what you said correctly, so if you really believe that Scott's idea was inferior, let's say, you basically said, okay, I'm really convinced this is how we should be doing this. And Scott should have somehow understand that you stand firmly.
Not somehow understand. So sorry, the question was, sorry, go on.
This conversation could last and kind of escalate, right? So when do we say enough is enough, for example, or we start understanding each other really?
So it's, when we were acting this out, we were just shouting, I want to do it this way, and he wanted to do it this way. And we never established like, well, let's talk about trade-offs, right? Let's talk about why that is good and why that's bad. But we never got to that level because we never got to the point where we wanted to actually have that conversation. And so something to trigger that conversation is what's needed. And so that's why I like the give a darn thing, because like, oh, you care a lot about that. Why are you electing to do it that way? What are you giving up for that versus gaining with this? And so if I was very weakly held to that opinion, I'm like, oh, okay, that's good points. I actually just wanted to try it. I saw some article about this technique and it sounded interesting. Or I've done this in the past. We've caught defects or interface issues by doing it top down versus bottom up. And you can start talking trade-offs and actually clarify your opinion, not just stating it.
But sometimes even after you clarify your opinion, it's easy to go into the, no, I feel strongly about this. Like, let's just cover that scenario, right? So let's say you felt strongly about something and I felt really strongly about something as well. How do we what do you say, avoid that impasse?
Ping pong table. No. Yeah, those are, that's where you can also bring in another team member. But again, it's starting that dialogue about the trade-offs and the benefits and negatives versus just an opinion. Because then it's like, oh, but there's this article by Martin Fowler here. And you're like, oh, but there's this article by Kent Beck over here. And then it challenges the ego a little bit. And so sometimes, so maybe I'm just weak-willed, but I will tend to bend because I'm always cool to try other things out. And so if you have two strong-headed people, I'm actually not sure. How would you deal with that?
Yeah, so my personal opinion is, I've come across this scenario once where we both were really strongly opinionated about one particular avenue. We did that. We went to the whiteboard and listed positives and negatives. And then we just did what you just said, actually. We did a team discussion, right? And we asked the team's opinion, what do you think we should be doing? Because it was a fairly major decision. It was not a trivial thing that we were deciding. So we did involve the whole team. And the team decided an approach which I was not comfortable with, but I was like, that's fine. The team decided this and hence I'm going to accept it. It's not about who's right or who's wrong, right? It's about the greater good and what the team really thinks is the right solution. So,
yeah, that's the thing to remember. It's not a competition.
Yeah.
Like we're trying to build products. We're paid to write code to build business value, not to exercise our egos and try to be right all the time. Computer science is still a loose statement.
From my limited experience, what you're saying that the conversation, I can't recall like when we haven't reached like agreement at some point. Argument, and yeah, okay, let's do this that way.
Yep.
So
Sounds like a healthy team.
All right. Oh, sorry. No.
Oh, they saw your calendar. Oh no.
Oh, wrong presentation. Too many presentations open. All right, we have one last one
This
to
is
go.
the last one. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Cool. All right. I'm gonna start working on this task. All right.
Yeah, I think
Cool.
all we need to do as part of the story is really write this API to return this
Yeah.
value. Should
Okay.
be about it, right?
Okay. Cool. All right. I'll write the first test. All
Okay,
right. Cool.
makes sense.
Dun, dun, dun.
Ooh, sorry, I just remembered. I have a meeting. I have a catch up.
What?
I'll be back in like 30 minutes.
I need to get the credentials for this.
Yes,
Yeah.
just get the credentials from here,
Yeah.
return in this
Uh,
API, and you should be good.
Right. Okay.
I'll
All
be
right.
back.
Cool. All right. All right. Dang it, the credentials don't work. All right. All right.
Fast forward 30 minutes later.
So
Wait,
the credentials didn't work.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, it's
Yeah.
not called API key, it's API underscore key. That's a mistake.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Okay. Got the test. Okay. It's filling across. Okay.
Ooh,
What do you think of this assertion?
Sorry,
I've
just
never
getting
used this
pinged in.
API before.
I forgot I have another meeting. I'm going to be
Okay.
back in like 90 minutes. Just feel free to continue. I'll be back.
What? Okay. All right. All right. What went wrong there?
One of you was a director.
Yeah. Yeah. So, anyone? Yeah, the missing pair, the disappearing pair. Sorry. But yeah, it's one of the important things with pairing is about communication, not just your day-to-day, but your schedule. We all sometimes have different roles in our organization. We have to run to different meetings, and when you're in a pairing session, it's good to know a little bit of that in advance. So you can say, hey, by the way, at 10:30 to 11, I got to do this, and then at 3 o'clock, I got to do this. Cool. All right. So that you can prepare for, it's like, I need these important credentials, or hey, here's an example that if I need to run for 90 minutes for some important director thing, that I have something to look at as a reference. Oh, sorry. Muscle memory reaction.
But yeah, just make sure that you communicate with the pair what you're going to be doing, because sometimes, like maybe for this instance, Scott didn't know enough about that, and we could have adjusted the pairing schedule to make sure that somebody else who probably had more context and was available more throughout the day could pair. So it's important to communicate with the whole team, not just your pair, right? So just make sure you're communicating upfront about what your schedule is going to look like. Yeah, any questions
Do you
from
have
you?
any opinions as to what a minimum pairing session length?
Oh,
Minimum pairing session length?
So if you look at each other's calendars and you see there's like, we have a half an hour and then a half an hour and that's it.
Okay. A minimum. So with engineers, we don't really have a lot of calendar commitments. I'm not sure how that is for cloud ops, but it's mainly like either engineering managers or PMs or directors that are in all the meetings, and it's very rare for the engineers. If it is, it's like either it's a shared meeting or it might be like one meeting that's out of normal kind of schedule. So for engineers, that's not as much of a problem. Like to have that kind of like Tetris problem with the calendar.
Unless you've got time zone issues.
That's another issue altogether.
So I'll throw out, I'm starting to believe that unless you have a 2-hour block, you're really not going to have a productive session.
I guess it depends on what you want to achieve of the
Yeah.
pairing session, right? I mean, if you want to like finish a story, for example, right? Like
Yeah.
2 hours seems really low, depending on the complexity
Yeah.
again, right? Because maybe if it's just changing a label and fixing some tests, sure,
Yeah.
2 hours might be enough.
To me, that's like enough to share context sometimes, and that's about it. But to actually do work, you definitely need more than that.
Yeah, so I don't know if this is the right answer, right? It depends.
Right.
We've established there's very definitely a lower bound.
Sure.
There are lengths of time below which it's not going to be a good experience.
Yeah. Like, well, we know that we always shoot for a day, right? We always want a pair to be allocated for that day, and then see if that's going to be rotated the next day. But you can think of that as like the target, is that you want a pair to work for the day together. But minimum, I don't know.
All right, that's it for our session.
All right.
That's it, right? Yes, that's it.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank
All
you.
right.